Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Wftga virtual conference. We're just going to give it a second for everyone to join in. Welcome to everyone who are joining us from all over the world. We're already at 300 people logged in. Wow. Welcome to the first ever Wftga virtual conference. Now, 350 people all over the world. We've got people from probably 5 or 6 continents here. Hello from Barcelona. I'm Geneviève. I'm from Montreal, and I will be your facilitator today. We're just going to give it another minute for people that are still coming into the room, and we will start. Welcome, everyone. You can put your name and your provenance in the chat. I can see we've got people from India, Spain, USA, Costa Rica, Hungary, Budapest, Kyrgyzstan, and Moldova, Germany. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the first ever Wftga virtual conference. My name is Geneviève Leclerc. Again, I'm joining you from Montreal. And to kick this off, I will introduce to you the president at Wftga, Alushka Ritchie. Alushka and I met at an association executive conference 3 years back, and I really want to thank her for bringing me here today. Alushka is a tourist guide from South Africa. She's a passion for gastronomy tours, passion for mentoring women, and works voluntarily for a number of charities. She's been a tourist guide for a long time. It is my pleasure to introduce Alushka, straight from Cape Town.
Thank you so much, Geneviève, and thank you for agreeing to be our facilitator for, as you mentioned, our first ever virtual conference. We are so honored to have so many of our members and tourist guides from across the globe joining us. So very briefly, quickly, who are we, the World Federation of Tourist Guide Associations? We are an international organization with association members, individual members, and affiliate members from almost 100 countries. And our focus is promoting the tourist guide profession and advancing the sector. We do this by ensuring that visitors and our tourism colleagues are really aware of the value that we as tourist guides offer, and that we are qualified and licensed and experienced at what we do. So as tourist guides, that in-person experience and that love of interacting with people is really important to us. And due to the pandemic, we had to postpone our in-person convention, which has now moved to 2022. So this opportunity of the virtual conference was really a good one for us to engage with our members and tourist guides and use the virtual space to our advantage. So thank you for everyone from across the globe for joining us. And as Geneviève introduced herself, we met a few years ago, and we've really been getting to know one another over the years. And with Genevieve's experience, we really thought it would be good to have her on board as facilitator. So Geneviève, you've been working in Congress management and consultancy for over 25 years. You also are managing director of an international society, scientific society, and a social entrepreneur. You founded 2 organizations supporting business events, Meet for Impact and Caravel Strategies. And your focus on developing evidence-based practice of social impact for the industry is really something that's resonated with us as an association, and something we are trying to achieve as well. So Geneviève, you're also involved in several projects that apply to social innovation principles and general social impact. And in recent years, you founded a network of international associations in Montreal, and which is also very active in the social innovation scene. So it's lovely having you on board, Geneviève, and I wish you well for today as you introduce our lineup of fantastic presenters and speakers. And just in advance, thank you to the whole team behind the scenes who's making today's event a success.
Thank you. Thank you, Alushka, for that kind introduction. I have to say, that I want to salute the incredible work that you and your team have put in over the last few months to make this happen. The shift to digital has been a challenge for individuals, but for organization. We've all experienced this, even the most digitalized of us. So the last 12 months has been a real challenge to get on board, and you guys have done it. It really shows that countless volunteering hours that have gone into this event have paid off. So I'm excited to be here and introduce the exciting program for the next 3 days. I want to tell our attendees, which we now have over 400, and it really is amazing. Have a look in the chat if you haven't done so, to see where everyone is from. You guys are true global community. So the chat is open. Today we will not have Q&A. Those of you that are logging in for the professional day tomorrow, we will have more interaction. But today we've got a series of amazing speakers that are going to talk about some of the challenge that tourist guides have been experiencing over the last year. I know it's been dreadful for those of us in the tourism sector. And a lot of you have worked really hard to adapt, have worked really hard to help your client and your organization. So today we're just going to get a few of these perspectives. How have we fared up? What has happened over the last year? But more importantly, how do we come out on top? What's this conference for? And a core skill of tourist guiding is storytelling. It is so important. The power of storytelling in interpreting culture, environment, and heritage is a true asset for tourist guides. So our speakers are going to talk to us about some of the best practices in telling compelling stories that bring so much richness to a visitor's experience. And how do we leverage going forward different tools, different channels, different skills to communicate our stories. So a series of compelling speakers, again, coming from all over the world. And we will kick this off with a pre-recorded video from Dr. Sam Hamm. He is a professor emeritus of protected area management, communication psychology, and sustainable tourism in the University of Idaho's College of Natural Resources. That is quite the wide range of expertise. He has taught graduate courses on communication psychology, sustainable tourism interpretation, and is keen on international issues. His research is focused on the application of communication theory to interpretive guiding. So we will watch now the video on the topic of interpretation. Have a great day, everyone. We'll be back in a few minutes right after the video.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Hamm, Professor Emeritus of Sustainable Tourism and Interpretation at the University of Idaho in the United States. As you know, the focus of this first day of the virtual conference of the Wftga is on interpretive guiding and interpretation, and generally the future of tour guiding. For many of us, and not just guides and tour operators, but for virtually anyone who's involved in basically any aspect of the global tourism industry, this is not only an appropriate focus, but it's a very welcomed focus. After what you've suffered the last 12 to 14 months, you know, what could be more uplifting than looking ahead to a brighter future? And that reminds me of a song that I quite liked in the mid-1980s, performed by a rock band from Madison, Wisconsin in the USA. The group was called Timbuk 3. And they performed a top hit worldwide called "The Future's So Bright, I Gotta Wear Shades." Now, if English is your second language, you might need that last part translated. It means the future's so bright, I need to wear sunglasses. And that's exactly what I think is going to happen in the near term. I think it, and I certainly hope it. Today, as I said, is the first day of the conference, the educational day, it's called, focused on interpretive guiding and interpretation. And this field, interpretation, has been a significant part of my professional life's work, both as a guide and interpreter, which I was for years, and also as a researcher and a professor and a trainer in nearly 60 countries. I know that some of you are already quite familiar with this word interpretation and what that means in terms of your profession as guides, but I'm also quite aware that many of you will be considering this word interpretation for the very first time in the context of professional guiding. And so I thought I'd take a few minutes to do a quick introduction to what interpretation is in the final minutes of my remarks today. And let me start by saying that both of the speakers who follow me today are professional interpreters. No, neither one of them works as a foreign language translator. That's not the way the word interpretation is used or intended in the context of the profession of guiding. On the contrary, Jane Beatty, who will speak first, is an expert in storytelling. And Jane's going to talk to you about the importance and the role of storytelling in professional guiding. You know, to a visitor on virtually any guided tour, that guided tour is a kind of a story that's told by the guide. They process the guide's commentary, the things the guide says and shows to them, right? But they don't preoccupy themselves with trying to remember all those facts. Rather, what they do is they take away from it a sort of summary conclusion, an impression, a moral or morals of the story that are quite personal and unique to each individual. Lars Bjorkman is a seasoned veteran tour guide in both natural and cultural settings all across the world. And Lars is going to share his views on the importance of developing and delivering an interpretive experience for your visitors, whether you're in a city, a natural landscape of some type, or in a world-class facility like the Vasa Museum in Stockholm, Sweden, where he works today. And of course, he's going to share with you the challenges of delivering those types of experiences in an empty museum during COVID times. But what is this thing, interpretation, that Jane and Lars and people like me and many of you do? In your field, guiding, the word interpretation refers to the way you communicate with your visitors. More generally, interpretation is an approach to communication that's generally associated with people in leisure settings, or as I prefer to call them, free choice learning environments, where visitors on a guided tour are pretty sure that you're not going to give them an exam later and test their recall of the facts that you gave them or the things that you showed to them. On the contrary, what research shows, and there's been quite a lot of research on visitor experiences and interpretation, studies show that what visitors want and expect from a guided tour experience is to be provoked to thought. They want to make personal connections to the things that you showed and explained. They want to extract personal meanings related to those things. This is not just entertaining fact-giving, infotainment, as it were, as I know a lot of guides approach their work. Rather, this is a guide, an interpretive guide, who intentionally, strategically, as a matter of professional intent, is attempting to facilitate the process of meaning making in the minds of each and every visitor. So at its most fundamental level, you can think of interpretation as an approach to communication that attempts to communicate in a thought-provoking way to an audience that is completely free to ignore you. Now let me talk a little bit about the interpretation profession. Interpretation is a worldwide profession. It includes many tens of thousands of interpreters, interpretive guides, storytellers, employees in national parks, museums, art galleries, zoos, aquariums, botanical gardens, historic sites, cultural shrines, as well as, don't forget, breweries, wineries, art galleries, cheeseries, and chocolate factories. Just about anywhere people go in order to have a good time and learn something, there are interpretive guides. Interpretation as a profession has been around for almost 75 years. It's not a new thing. And it's been the subject of both teaching and quite a lot of empirical research. In fact, in many countries around the world, you can take courses at the university called interpretation, or interpretive methods, or interpretive techniques. You can even get a university degree in interpretation. So this is an established and well-developed profession that I know a lot of guides are only now just learning about, but you will find that you have quite a lot of interests that overlap with the field of interpretation. In fact, probably most of them. I want to give you a sense now of just the geographic reach of this profession by talking about some of the professional associations. These are organizations with members and programs. I'll start with the first and largest in the world, and that's the National Association for Interpretation based in the United States. But it has almost 7,000 members, and they come from 30 countries. And so it's not just a North American thing. And Interpretation Canada, just to the north of us, also has several hundred members, right? And just to the south of us is the Mexican Association for Heritage Interpretation, which is a new organization, right, that is now growing and already has a substantial membership and a very, very active publication and training program. Going back to the National Association for Interpretation, or the NAI, they are the world leader in certification programs. They have training programs and offer certification in a variety of categories, including the first is Certified Interpretive Guide, which Maricar Donato, that many of you know, is actually finishing now. She'll be shortly certified by NAI as an interpretive guide. Also Certified Interpretive Hosts, Certified Interpretive Planners, Certified Interpretive Trainers are also part of the certification program. And NAI also, along with other organizations, offer sometimes monthly webinars on some aspect of interpretive guiding or interpretation generally. The Australian Association for Interpretation, or it's called Interpretation Australia, along with the Interpretation Network of New Zealand, together they have about 1,000 members. And there's also a global heritage interpretation organization called the Global Alliance for Heritage Interpretation, which includes these organizations from almost 100 countries. I should have mentioned Interpret Europe. Interpret Europe has 1,000 members and almost 57 countries represented in this one interpretive professional society of interpreters. The Global Alliance brings all of these organizations together with the specific purpose of enhancing the skills of interpreters and interpretive guides globally. Just last month, in fact, not last month, but just 3 weeks ago in early February, the Global Alliance held a 3-day global forum on interpretation, which was attended by about 300 people from around 7 different countries. Also, you're going to find, as you would expect with an established professional field, a lot of Facebook pages, too many Twitter accounts, many thousands on LinkedIn, the professional network that many of you know about. You will also find Wikipedia pages on interpretation, including one on thematic interpretation. I didn't develop it, but it's about my work over about 4 decades, developing the thematic approach to interpretation that some of you have already learned about from Maricar Donato, and probably more will as she continues to develop training programs for Wftga. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. This organization is a perfect place for the field of interpretation to have a place, a role. The field of interpretation, the profession of interpretation, right, is old, established, it's seasoned, it's mature. It is focused specifically on what guides do every day in their work. My research in particular and my training focuses on what constitutes excellence in interpretive guiding, which we know from much research is not the visitors remembering all of your facts. If you judge your effectiveness by that, you're dooming yourself to mediocrity or failure, but rather on the extent to which you provoke them to think their own thoughts and make their own meanings. And this is quite an exciting area of research and a practical methodology that most guides find rather appealing. So I hope you'll be interested in learning more about that. So with that, I'm now going to hand the rest of the day over to my old friend and a new friend, Jane and Lars, along with the conference facilitators. I want to again thank Alushka and Marikar and the WFTGA for inviting me to speak today. And of course, I certainly want to thank all of you for your kind attention. I hope it stimulated, provoked some thinking. Have a good day. Have a good conference. Goodbye.
Well, if Dr. Sam was live, I would have loved to thank him for that. I have already learned a tremendous amount in these 13 minutes. So we will kick it off with the next speaker. Before that, I just want to remind everyone, those of you on social media, you can have a conversation on the different channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, with the hashtag WFTGA virtual. So our tech team are going to share that in the chat, but hashtag WFTGA virtual. And also the conference link on YouTube has been put in the chat. I think Emma might put it again if you want to share it with anyone that wants to join us. So up next, Jane Beatty is from the New Zealand National Association of Interpretation. She has over 25 years in the tourism sector, predominantly in the areas of visitor experience, planning, program, product design, heritage interpretation, and guide training in sustainable and ecotourism environmants. She is currently the owner and principal consultant at Tuhura Communications. Live from New Zealand, Aotearoa, Jane Beatty. Kia ora, Jane, up to you.
Kia ora, good morning from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and a very early morning it is here. It's a little after midnight my time, so it's great to see everybody online, including some familiar names there. And I'm glad to see that others from around the world have decided to be up to join us at this hour of the morning, and even earlier morning as we hit the East Coast morning as well. Quite a tough act to follow, old Sam Hamm, actually. He has been a dear friend for many years, and I've so enjoyed learning from him. He comes up with so much great information and research, and certainly as a graduate student myself at one time, what I learned from him was incredibly valuable in my research as well. So where he's given you a basic idea of what interpretation is and the basic tenets of it, I'm actually planning to take that just a little bit further. And going to talk a little bit about, if I can get this to start, there we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about storytelling, which I know is something that many of you are familiar with. You use it all the time. Some of the best tours I've been on around the world have had the most amazing storytellers on them that have connected me to place and time and given me a view of a world that I would not have otherwise seen on my own. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for guides, and certainly having been a frontline interpreter myself and also a tour guide around the world in a number of locations, a lot of what I have learned I put into practice, and a lot of that I'm hoping to share with you today, even though we've got a very limited amount of time. So I'm hoping to just give you a really quick overview of storytelling, because I know you know so much about that already, and really link it into interpretation. How do the two connect? And then I'm actually planning to do just a very, very quick case study, of course, from New Zealand. And actually, one thing I should connect, I'm actually a master trainer with the National Association for Interpretation in the United States, as well as a member of Interpretation Network New Zealand that Sam referred to as well. So as he said, there's lots of great organizations out there, and I encourage you to join them and see what they have. So we'll do a slight case study, and hopefully you'll be able to get something from that to be able to use in your own tours. So what is storytelling? It's the interactive art of using words and actions to reveal the elements and images of a story while encouraging the listener's imagination. So says the US National Storytelling Network. And as you all know, storytelling is one of the oldest forms of communication out there, from the time we painted on rocks, shared stories of a day's hunt around the campfire, and perhaps even used it as an entertainment purpose. We know from storytelling, as it's developed over the years, that there's also some good practices to storytelling. A good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a plot. Without a plot, there's no way to carry the story through. It develops, the characters develop, the story develops to where we had a climax, and then ultimately we reach the end of that story. But what happens when you read, for example, a bad book, that at the end of it, we really don't reach resolution? There've been characters that haven't exactly been connected to through the story, and you're feeling somewhat flat about that story. Well, those same things carry into interpretation as well. So to talk a little bit about the qualities of good interpretation in New Zealand, I want to use just a small case study. And for those of you in New Zealand, I wish you could join in and help me share, because there's just so much in this amazing country to be shared. It's a culture that's rich with stories and legends. It has a rich art culture. There's a great abundance of what we call kai moana, food of the sea. There's great wines and a very globally influenced local food scene. And, that also, you'll notice, translates into interpretation as well. I'm having a problem with my screen here. There we go. So one of the biggest things that we can do as interpreters that Sam may have referred to is that it can be thematic. When we develop a theme or a plot, what we're looking to do is find pearls that we can put on a string, if you will, and relate them throughout the entire journey. So whether you are working in a space that is just a small community, perhaps you're taking a walk through a neighborhood, perhaps you're taking a day hike or a day walk through a city to look at the architecture. Maybe it's multiple days where you're looking at a region or a country or even multiple countries. Regardless of what length of time that you're working in, I really encourage you to find a theme that you can tie it all together. Sam probably also mentioned the way the mind works and connects to things, and that the information has to be purposeful that we give to people. And then it also has to relate to people. A theme can help us relate by tying pieces together that might have been influenced by their own lives. They can find their own meaning in it. So that theme really relies on a central idea to assist development of communication. So these are a handful of images from New Zealand. Some of you may have been here, some may not. The rich culture, it's somewhat reminiscent of what you might have seen in places like Hawaii or other Polynesian cultures. And it has the artwork, the way everything is designed. When you first arrive in New Zealand, tourism here has been really purposeful. And as a guide, it's something that you can really look to. There's the idea of welcome, the gate that's on the top right. You'll see that in a lot of places, in our meeting houses, our maraes, the way you're welcomed on. The artwork that is there signifies place, who's there, and what that place means to them. You'll see that artwork also developed through into other places, including on the bottom right. And this is one of my favorite places to go in New Zealand. So if you haven't been here over the last year, a lot has really been developed in this area along the Kaikoura coast, where we had a terrible earthquake a few years ago. And the stories that they've told in this space are really quite incredible. Some additional stories that can be told as well might have to do with the idea of kaitiakitanga, or what we call guardianship. Now, guardianship is something that I think is becoming a more important word in our world, because we're looking to be stewards of this earth. Ecotourism and sustainable tourism both are growing in leaps and bounds. And certainly during this period of COVID, many countries and tourism operators and tourism groups are taking a step back to look at how they can tell a story of sustainability, how we can bring visitors back to our places in a meaningful way. On the left, you'll see what we call a taniwha, or a water spirit. These water spirits are there to protect the lakes, rivers, streams from anything that may cause risk to it. They're somewhat mythical, but for New Zealanders, they represent the idea that we need to look after something. And if that story can be carried all the way through the places that you visit, there's a lot of water in New Zealand, there's a lot of places with other significant spirits that you can tie into. There's a lot of artwork, there's a lot of stories, there's an amazing amount of history. So perhaps guardianship is something that you can tie through on a story of a place, so that when a visitor goes home, they really connect to that idea, and it's something that they take home with them. Something Sam probably will have also mentioned about the idea of purpose is that we're ultimately looking to shift an attitude and potentially behavior change over the long term. So what else can we do? Some of the other things that Sam may have also mentioned that are really important in your tours, the idea of provocation. I know Sam will have mentioned that. It's one of his most favorite things. And provocation's not meant to be something that's threatened. It's how do we provoke in a good way? How do we engage visitors where they are so that they can find their own meanings in things? How do we use something like multiple perspectives and the idea of something that's multi-sensory to provoke thought, to provoke conversation, to provoke ideas, to provoke connection to place, to provoke the idea of learning for the future? How do we relate? How can we relate to visitors so that what we may understand about something is not the same as what our visitors bring? So can we again find something in that story and that narrative arc that we're looking to develop that will help a visitor to relate? And then in the same way we do again with storytelling, we look to reveal. What are the secrets we can reveal? What are the things that visitors might reveal on their own if we don't tell them all of the answers? One additional way we can do that, certainly in New Zealand, and I know this will appeal to many of you around the world, with food tourism being something that's growing so quickly, is all of those things can be done with food. So in New Zealand, we have a rich Māori traditional food tradition, and we have the modern foods that we enjoy today. And then with all of the immigration that we've had here, we also have been very influenced globally by the food that has been brought in from other cultures. So you can tell the story, if food is something you were talking about, of that immigrant tradition, of people moving around, of change, of shift, of integration, if you will, of the different foods that have come to our shores. And that can be shared while people are eating. And it's something that you can also take with you to potential sites. So when you are looking to build a tour, what are the different sites that you can go to that might help you build on that story? And know too that the thematics don't have to connect every stop on your journey, but the more of them that you can connect, the stronger your story will be and the more memorable the experience that visitors will go home with afterwards. So finally, a couple of steps that you can take is to look at finding the common thread. As I mentioned earlier, what are you most passionate about? Where you're guiding, then the places that you go. It's often easy to develop a thematic tour if you're looking at something that you are very keen on, know a lot about, have a great deal of interest in. So build on what you have, build on those strengths. What stories can you tell? How can you bring multi-experiences and what places have commonalities in your itinerary that you can build together, as I mentioned earlier. We're looking to find out what the common theme is that can tie them all together. So in quick conclusion, really what we're looking at is interpretation and storytelling have an amazing overlap of ideas. Many of the terminologies can be placed together. They can build on one another. So I'm really trying to encourage you to take those stories, all of the stories that you have in the places that you go, and see how you can strengthen them by using some of the methodologies from the field of interpretation. As Sam concluded with, the more that you can read and find, get online, maybe look at something like ArcGIS and the story maps that are there, you'll start to see those stories of the places that connect. You'll see it in tourism marketing when the idea of a brand comes through. So many of those ideas are out there for you to look at. And I thank you for your time this morning, and really appreciate all of the great work that you're doing. And I cannot, like the rest of you, wait to get back out in the world when it reopens after this current pandemic. Thanks so much.
Big thank you, Jane. And I have to share that I am a big fan of New Zealand. I've had the privilege of spending time there 3 or 4 times in the last 3 years on work. And the Maori and Pacific heritage of storytelling is indeed really impressive. And the heartfelt approach that I have been extended, the spirit of welcoming visitors and extending care there, they call manakitanga, I believe, makes it a wonderful place to visit and discover and even want to stay there. And talking about storytelling, I just want to say that we are making a story today about this community. Can you believe that we are now over 500 participants? And we've actually probably got more because some of you may be having a watch party there with some colleagues or some friends. Absolutely outstanding turnout for this first ever virtual conference. So making stories and making history. We will now introduce Lars Bjorkman. He is the business development manager at the Vasa Museum. He's not only that, but he's also an authorized guide in Stockholm. And before settling down in Stockholm, he has guided on skis, he has guided in the savannah and on hiking trails. So a bit of a nature buff, I think we've got here. Hello, Lars. Thanks for joining. Over to you.
Well, hi there. Thank you for having me. That was a very nice introduction. I've gone a bit more cultural than nature guide now. I'm a museum guide or a business manager for one of the world's most unique museums. And well, I would like to welcome you into the museum, and a quiet museum it is. And I want to share with you some of our stories. But first of all, well, my short story here, I should say, I've been a guide for about 20 years, but I just started here a little bit more than a year ago. And what a year it's been. As you all know, different, difficult, and well, being a tour leader, you all know that one of the key features as a guide is that you have to work impromptu, you have to improvise. And so we have done this last year, because 20th of March last year, 2020, we closed the doors for visitors. So it is quiet. It is just me here in the museum now. It might be a few colleagues, maybe someone on the ship right behind me working, because it needs to be taken care of even if the museum is closed. So I'm in the museum. I'm on the 6th floor out of 7. And I will take a little bit of a walk with you. I don't have any slides to show, but I will tell you some stories, and then we'll do a quick short walk after that. But for those of you who don't know Vasa and the story behind Vasa, it's I'll do a super quick version. But first of all, on a positive note, in these sad pandemic times, you should know that the success of Vasa today is all based on a huge naval fiasco. In other words, if you think that the moment now is miserable, there will be better days. And them shades Sam were talking about, better days will come. The ship that you can see behind me now is, well, it's the only thing we exhibit. It's a one object museum, you could say. And it is a royal warship from the 17th century, built in 1628. We were then a so-called, well, superpower, Sweden, and we were doing a lot of fighting and battles out in the Baltic Sea. So the king, Gustavus II Adolphus, needed a major warship. And well, here she was, 1628. She sailed off from the old town in Stockholm, or what we now call the old town. And she didn't survive her maiden voyage. She sank just, well, after a mile. So that was kind of a tragedy. She went down to about 30 meters below surface, and she stayed there for 333 years until she was raised, salvaged in 1961. And now we then have a museum. And well, it might have been a big fiasco and havoc in the 17th century. But if that would not have happened, we would not have her today, and we would not know as much as we do today about naval, well, warfare and customs in that era as we do today. And it's a bit odd that we do have a ship that's been 333 years on the bottom of the sea. But the positive thing again is that in the Baltic Sea, we don't have the small shipworm. Those are the fellows around the world in the oceans that eat all the wood. So after 333 years, we raised her up, and she is 98% original. So it's quite a unique museum. And you can see I'm standing pretty much up in the stern, and all the way up to the beakhead, we have about approximately 70 meters long of a ship. And you can see the masts almost sticking up, well, out of the ceiling. And they kind of do, because if you see the museum from outside, you will see 3 masts sticking up, and that's the original height as well, a bit more than 50 meters. But yeah, that was the story about Vasa. And some of you might have been here, and I hope the rest of you will be here. I can tell you that all tour guides, tour leaders will be able to come in for free, and you can tell all your own stories. But I'm going to tell you some first. And the first and foremost thing with Vasa as a visitor is probably wow. Because when we stand down by the information desk or at the cashier, when they come in and see the ship, we hear a lot of wow. And this wow factor is kind of hard to deliver when the doors are closed and the visitors can't come in. So yeah, it's been a challenging year. Instead of showing the wow, we need to tell the wow. And it's a lot of people we need to tell it for, because we've been, proudly enough, Scandinavia's #1 museum, most visited museum in Scandinavia. With 2019, we hit 1.5 million visitors in a year. So it is a popular museum, and we do have a lot of fans around the world. So we need to keep in touch with them. And how do we do that, and how do we cope? We are a government-owned museum, and governments, it's a lot of bureaucracy. And what happened on the 20th of March 2020, when we closed down, is that the communication department that is taking care of 4 different museums at the time, they had so much to do. So me and another 2 colleagues, we kind of hijacked the social media channels. And we started to do live broadcasting. And we started out when the museum director locked the door on the 20th of March. And for the next 3 months, every weekday, we broadcasted live. And we chose the time slot of 1628, because that is when Vasa sailed off, and that's when she sank. So 1628, maybe it wasn't the most, well, brightest time, or when we could hit or reach the grandest audience, but it was the time slot connected with Vasa. And the 3 of us, yeah, we did not always stand in front of the camera. We were mostly behind the camera, and we did not have a lot of technical, we didn't have staff helping us out with this. We were doing it with our own iPhones, but we just did it as, well, Nike say, just do it. And the storytellers in this case, they were our colleagues. So anyone, you could meet anyone, basically, from a researcher, the museum director, of course, and the staff in the souvenir shop, and all got to tell their story. You also got to come with us to, on board the ship, to see how we clean the ship, which we actually do every year. And you also got to come up into the ceiling with us to travel from one side to the other of the museum on about 50-meter sides on a movable footbridge. So it was kind of showing off the museum life, or life behind the scenes, so to say. It was not just all about the artifacts and Vasa herself, even though Vasa was the main character, so to say. Because, well, Jane told you what storytelling is about, so I'm not going to do that. But we always looked into, 1, to have a character, then to have a happening, and then 3, to give an insight. And well, it depends also where you have your audience. We are now, well, in Scandinavia, in Europe, and we found out that Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube were the channels we were to use. So depending on where you are in the world, it might be completely different channels. It all depends on where you have your audience. But what we also realized, since we did not have all the technical knowledge, we didn't have the language skills, but we did have a lot of supportive colleagues. We did have friends. We had people around the world, basically, that would help us out. And sometimes it can actually be better that someone else tell your story. And for example, we had Swedish embassies around the world that got to hear about us and then hear about the stories, and they reposted them in their own channels, or they asked us for their own edition if we did not have that language skill in the museum, where we have guides that speak, well, 20-some different languages. So that was, well, a chance to get a bit more credibility if someone else tells your story. We are then also in the museum, and this is the stage where we can tell our stories. But as you all know, you got to think outside the box, and we thought about outside the museum. So what we could do when the museum doors were closed, we could still meet a few people. Limited at that time was about 10, I think, and we took them around on a guided tour around the museum. So we had to find, so to say, a new stage and a new way of telling. Well, it was a regular guiding, so to say, but outside, something that we were not too familiar with. But we could tell the story about the architecture, and at the same time show where the ship was built, where she sailed off, and where she also unfortunately sank. Another way of telling stories in this pandemic year for me as a business development manager, maybe not so much a social media manager, but my task is also to interact with, well, B2B, as we say, business to business. That is then I need to keep in touch with DMCs, tour operators, travel agents. And that is, positively enough, been making it a lot easier with all these platforms like Zoom, Teams, Skype, Google Meet, you name. So as a matter of fact, in this last year, I would probably have been able to meet more cooperators than I would have had in a normal year when you go to workshops and travel fairs. But then again, we do miss that personal interaction and meeting. Yeah, so that was it from here. I'm gonna move around a little bit so you realize that I'm not standing in front of a poster. And to do so, I'm gonna remove my cameras. It might be a bit shaky for a few seconds. And also, we do have public Wi-Fi, I can tell you that, in the museum. So when you get here, you will be able to use it. But at a bit of a stretch that I'm moving, there might be a bit lack, but I'll be back in 1-2 seconds. And the focus is going to come right back to when I slow down in front of this screen, hopefully. What I'm at least trying to show you is that we also, there the focus I think is coming. What I'm trying to show you is that we are also trying to tell stories in a modern way or digitally. So upclose.vasamuseet.se, you will find an application, and this is for our latest exhibition. So yeah, we just got one huge artifact, but we got 11 different exhibitions. And in this Up Close Vasa Museum app, we have the stories of all these different sculptures. So you can see here, hopefully, might be a bit shaky. The lions and the king up there as well. So in this application, you can go in there, choose your own language, 11 different to choose from. So I hope the Wi-Fi with us. And yeah, your connection is unstable, it says, but I hope I will be better with you now. As you can see, the ship is pretty brown, and you, after 333 years, a lot of the, well, all the coloring has basically gone away. But here on this small roof of this gallery, you can see some of the 700 different sculptures that the ship was adorned with. And research is continuously being done, and we're learning more and more new things. So those sculptures that I showed you, we have recreated them, color them in the original colors. You can imagine that the brown ship is, or was, kind of impressive. I hope the focus is quite okay for you. But this, see the colors here, pink and green and blue and so on and so forth. I'll turn the camera around again. So yeah, that is, it's an application that you can visit even though the museum is closed. So you can make up your own stories, or you can read all the stories about the Vasa Museum. Also, our audio guide, which is free of charge, is open and available on our website, and that is even into 18 different languages, if I'm not mistaken. And that you should know that when you come here, you are welcome to do your own guiding. We have guides here, of course, and we have also the documentary movie in a few different languages, but you are, as a tour guide, tour leader, welcome to make your story in the museum. So yeah, that was pretty much everything from me. We just hope, we don't know when we will reopen, hopefully end of April this year. But you should know that you are more than welcome to come and visit us at the Vasa as soon as we reopen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lars. Yeah, thank you, Lars, and thank you, Jane. Thank you, Dr. Hamm. And I hope you're all enjoying our virtual Wftga conference. Isn't it amazing how we can literally zoom around the world and get different perspectives from the experts? So thanks again, Lars, Jane, and Dr. Hamm. The conference also reminds me of my favorite book, one of my favorite books. By the way, today is World Book Day. So it reminds me of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. The alchemist who traveled far and wide in search for treasures, answers, only to discover when he finally returned home that it had been there all along, on his doorstep, right before his eyes. I'm the head of the Wftga training division. My name is Viola. And recently I was told that our members of the training division are not visible enough. Thank you for that. Have we been alchemists? Our training division in Wftga consists of 20 lead international trainers with years of experience of guiding in their own area of qualification and training tourist guides worldwide. 45 international trainers with fresh energy and enthusiasm, and hundreds of national trainers who extend Wftga's reach to many corners of the world. Now we will dive into our own treasure. We will let two of our jewels shine. I will hand back to Genevieve now to introduce our very own Elena and Hani. Enjoy.
Thank you, Viola. Thank you, Lars, for that wonderful tour. I have to say, we've seen the tour guide shine through that little walkthrough, which I have not seen this museum, but I'm a sailor myself, so it was Storia after my own heart. So thank you again. And up next, we have two trainers, as Viola mentioned. Elena is a Wftga national trainer from Moldova. She's from the National Tourist, she's a National Tourist Guide, and she's also a project coordinator at the Moldova Tourist Information Center. And Hani has been a tourist guide since 2011 in Iran. She's also a Wftga international trainer, and she was awarded amongst the top tourist guides in Iran by the Tehran Tourist Guide Association 2 years ago. So ladies, live from Moldova and Iran, welcome. Elena, I believe you were speaking first.
Yes, hi everybody. I hope you hear me well. Can you hear me good?
We do, we hear you perfectly.
Okay. Just 1 second. So hi everybody, my name is Elena and I am from Moldova. Today I will tell you about my story, how I started as a tourist guide and how I started to tell stories. First of all, I lived 7 years in US. Recently I moved back to Moldova. And for everybody who doesn't know yet, where is Moldova? Because all my friends ask me, where is Moldova? Is it Moldavia? Is it Mongolia? Is it Malta or something else? No, Moldova is in between Ukraine and Romania. Also, you can see here in the middle is like the Black Sea. This is where we are. What are we famous for? We're famous for being the #1 of a beaten path travel destination in Europe by Lonely Planet in 2013. So how I find a good story and where? Also, you can text in the chat box, like, where do you find your best stories? On each of my slides, you'll see on the right-hand side a bright image. That's the Tree of Life. Later on, you can find more information. We have it on YouTube and also on our site, moldova.travel. So, how I decided to find my stories and where, because when I came back to Moldova from US, what I realized is I don't know my country at all. So what I decided to do is to go back to my roots, to the rural side, to find out who I am and who are the people from my country. Sounds crunchy? So what I do, I started to visit each village from my country, starting from the south and going up to the north. Some of the villages, they're not as touristic, but I still try to find that interesting story. So how I did it, I interact with locals and find out why they are so special, like this lady. Everybody knows her in Moldova. What they like to sing, to dance. What is their story? So the story behind this picture is about a couple who loves to sing. The lady, we call her Bunica Batedoba. She participated at the Eurovision contest. That's like a national treasure, and this is her husband. Next one, find out their secret place. This picture down here, I am down there on the rock sitting and eating some traditional pies. And the other two men behind me are the writer from National Geographic and also Sergiu Hanganu from Lalova. He has a pension. So when we are trying to find a story, a very good one, I'm asking them, which is your favorite place? So he's like, do you want to really know my favorite secret place? And we said, yes, of course. So he said, let's get in my car and let's go. So what we tried is we tried to capture the sunset over the Dniester River. Until we got there, the road was really, really bad, but still we had like a wonderful view. And when I say about secret place, sometimes we can also find out a very secret one, like this one. How do you think, what is this called? You can type if you can. So this in Moldova is called Beach, in English will be like a cellar where we keep the wine and all sorts of good stuff. What is he's famous for is he's making all sorts of rakia from different fruits, very exotic ones. So this is his hidden and secret place. A lot of times when I was traveling through the village, it was really hard to make the people to tell their stories because they are very, very shy. So what we did, we tried to capture the emotion, like this girl. The story behind this picture is about the holiday that we have in Moldova. It's called Sânzăiene. It's when we started to pick our flowers and we make a crown like this girl. And at the nighttime, we make a big fire, and after that, we'll let these crowns down by the river or by a lake. So this is what is this holiday about. This is another emotion, one of my favorite ones. I always support like small wineries, and especially from the rural side. So here we really got the emotions speaking out. Or another one like this one. When I talk about Moldova, this is the first image that comes up to me. These ladies making traditional food. We say traditional, what they're making is sarmale. Actually, it's from Turkey, this type of dish, but we have it also. Sometimes when you have a really good capture like this, it might get you also in the National Geographic. I hope you see it really good. Here are the ladies. So you never know, like your good story, how far it can get or where. Also, I tried to find out what they're proud of. Somebody's proud of their wine because we have a lot of wineries, more than 200. Somebody's proud of making all sorts of, like this picture on the right side is compote from fruits. Somebody's proud of their traditional wear, like in Gagauzia. Sometimes what is ordinary for them is extraordinary for us. Like the picture on the left, this is our traditional, I would say, drink from the Soviet Union. Probably a lot of us who used to be a part of the Soviet Union can remember this, because I tell everybody we don't have Coca-Cola in the childhood. I didn't have any, but we had kvass. Also, about like clay, this man on the right-hand side, his name is Gonchar Vasile. So he was telling me when you touch the clay, he feels everything and he can tell you your story without talking. Once you're ready, tell their story like it's yours and post it on social media like I did, because for them it's very hard to be on social media, especially from the rural side. So what we do, we collect the best stories and we put it there. And here you can see the impact and how many people could see their stories. On the right-hand side, I am at the Beleu Lake in Belen village, which is a UNESCO heritage site after a WFTG training. Here's is that person who you saw it earlier with the wine, and look at the impact and how many people he reached through his storytelling. 154,000 people. Right now we have another, I would say, holiday, which is very important for us, and it's called the Mărțișor, because this year we can't really spend time together as much as we did before. We started a campaign again to involve the people from the rural side to wear a mărțișor and give it to the next person and tag the person who they want to give it to. The legend about this, you can find it also on Moldova.travel. It's a beautiful legend about how spring is trying to fight winter and she wins. So we have to wear this for 1 month. And after that, we put it on a tree to have a good harvest. So don't let your tradition disappear. Bring them in the future through storytelling. I want to say thank you. Also a special thank you I want to say for the photographers from National Geographic, Costaș Dumitriescu, Andreea Forlani, Moldova Tourist Information Center, Antrim Tourist Guide Moldova, Not the least is Wftga team, who really helped us to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. I love the idea of finding people's secret places and asking them what they're proud of. I will now hand it over to Hani.
Hello, everyone. Good day. Nice to be among you. First, thank you to dear Elena for sharing us her own story of Moldova. And I think everyone is started to get interested in visiting there. And I want to start with my own story. I want to tell you how we can bring the storytelling tradition into the future and the virtual tours. You know, about 10 years ago, when I became tourist guide, once I received an email from the agency that there was a family from Netherlands who want to come to Iran, and they just aim to visit Iran, the Caspian Sea in Iran. And the only thing that they told me was that it seems that the sun has problem, but we don't know exactly what is the problem. Okay, I accepted the tour and started it. When I met Rudy, I found out that he's on wheelchair. He got injured while he was doing a ski and he couldn't walk anymore, but he was dreaming to visit Caspian Sea from childhood, and he did it. It made me to feel that everyone has his or her own story, like Rudy. And now we saw that Elena had same story that you could feel interest in her eyes, the passion. If I want to tell you about the storytelling techniques to engage our participants, I can mention 8 classic storytelling techniques. One is monomyth, thing that we heard when we were child. The fairy tales that a person go to a journey, complete this journey and become hero. Another technique is called mountain. It's somehow like monomyth, but sometimes it hasn't got that much happy ending. Sometimes it ends up in drama. Also, we have another technique, which is called nested loops. Even we have some different stories beside each other, but the main story is what we need to transfer. Another technique that we have, mostly we heard when we are reading or hearing to the stories about influencers. When we hear about Martin Luther King, for example, we have the reality and a person who give hope to the society. And then we have another technique, which is somehow similar to nested loops, but here we have different stories ended up in one conclusion. Also, we have another technique that I think you have read it mostly in the literal books, when we put the audience in the middle of the action, and then we tell them what was the process to end up here. Also, we have another technique, which is called false start, that we start everything in a very calm way. We say that everything is okay, and suddenly something happened and ruined everything the challenge has started. Also, we have another technique, which is like a flower. We have different stories, but they are all around the main one. Okay, now you can think that which technique Elena used for her presentation and which one we use mostly on our tours. Now I have a question. Do we miss anything in a virtual tour? All of us used to tell the story of our country, the monuments and the cultures. But do we miss anything when we are guiding a virtual tour? First, we should see what are the senses that we use when we are hearing a story. Among our 5 senses, which is the most important sense? I think maybe it can be hearing when we are listening to a story. Also, when we are on a tour, we see monuments, places, or people. The others, sometimes we can touch, sometimes we cannot. And smelling and tasting is mostly by our imagination when we are listening to one story. So, how we can transfer these senses to our virtual tour to be sure that our audience, our tourists, enjoy it a lot? First, using images. And I suggest you to use your own images. Don't copy from Google. We are different from Google. We are different from Wikipedia. We should be unique. Also, we can use videos. And again, we can use the videos that were made by ourselves. Another thing is being yourself, as Elena was herself. Each of us has our own stories. I have my own stories, and this is what made me Hania. And I'm sure that each person in this conference has his own story. So tell your own. Don't try to imitate. Also, no one can ignore the importance of words and tone of the voice. Although we are far from our tourists, but they can hear us. And by our words that we choose and the voice, we can transfer our message to them. But the only thing has remained is that don't think that virtual tour is different from other tours that we had before. Everything is the same. So don't forget the balance before information and entertainment. Try to make a balance between them to let your tourists enjoy. And try to find your own story. I'm sure that you will be successful. Thank you for your attention and hope we come back to the roads soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hania. I loved your different methods of storytelling. I've written them down. And although I'm not a tourist guide, I tend to do storytelling in the workshops I give. So I shall be using your tips. We're going to have a little break for about 15 minutes, but don't go away if you can. We'll be presenting some live enthralling music. Introducing our musician, Alaskan-born Cheyenne Brown. She's been based in Scotland for over half her life, where she performs and teaches the Scottish harp. Her playing style is characteristically free and creative, making much use of improvisation, bass lines, and contrasting textures. In addition to regularly teaching workshops abroad, pre-pandemic, she works with several different bands, including the Bluegrass Scottish Fusion North Atlantic Project, the World Music Collaboration Homebound, and plays in duo with fiddler Tori Dugan. Enjoy the music and see you back at 12:30 sharp, 12:30 UTC, 1:30 Austria time.
Hello everyone. I'm going to start with a favourite piece from the Highlands of Scotland. It comes from a very old collection called the Simon Fraser collection. These tunes were collected around the 1700s and they're beautiful pieces, but what I like to do with Scottish music is give them a modern interpretation. So this is an old piece with a modern interpretation called Rory Doo. The name of that tune was Ruri Du. I'll just write it there. It's Gaelic for the dark Ruri. It's not really well, it's kind of a folk melody, but it's just a very old Scottish piece that has been collected in the Simon Fraser collection. I'm going to carry on with a Burns medley, starting with My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose, and carrying on into Ye Banks and Braes of Bonnie Doon. So we're moving now from the Highlands down to Ayrshire in Scotland. By the way, this harp is a modern lever harp. It's made here in the Highlands of Scotland by a company called Ardeval Harps. And this is sycamore, local Scottish sycamore, and lime and spruce that it's made out of. So here we go for Robert Burns. Sorry, I don't have an Instagram page. If anybody wants to volunteer to be my admin to make an Instagram page, that'd be lovely. I'm not that clever yet. I do teaching online though, so it's more than possible to start the harp online, which is just amazing. So if you're interested in any recordings or learning the harp online, I've popped my email in there. I'm going to carry on with a Highland Medley. It's very common in Scotland to put more than one tune together in a set. So this is a set of 3 tunes, starting with a slow air called Mari Dan Oak. That means that's how Mari, sweet and young, I think. And then continuing into a Strathspey, which is a very special dance from the Murray area, the Speyside area of Scotland. And this Strathspey is called That's How the Cabbage Was Wasted. And finishing off with a reel called Loch Torridon, which I think is one of the most beautiful parts of Scotland. Thank you very much. Lovely to play for you all today, and 512 participants on. That's the most people I've played for in a year, so lovely to see you all, and please pop any questions into the chat.
Thank you, Cheyenne. I think you've been monitoring the chat, but we've had some wonderful comments for you. This amazing musician sounds like she's playing several instruments at once. I never knew one could bring out so much sound from a harp. Someone else said the music and your play is wonderful. So I just wanted to really thank you from the bottom of our heart. I think this musical break was a fantastic idea. So thanks for being with us. Making us
recordings available. If anybody is interested, check the website or send me a wee email. Hope you have a wonderful
lovely. And you've also, I see you've also put your email in the chat, and everyone, her information is on the WFTGA virtual website as well. So thank you very much, Cheyenne. Welcome back, everyone. We are back for session 2. For those of you just joining, I am Geneviève Leclerc. I'm live from Montreal, where it is an early, cold and sunny winter morning. So it's very beautiful here, but quite cold. We want to tell all of you that haven't registered for the professional day tomorrow that you can still do so. We will put on the screen the information regarding tomorrow's program. It really is for professional working guides. So please go on to the Wftga virtual conference website and register. It is free, but you do have to, it is not free. It is a paying ticket for tomorrow, but there's lots of great conference on professional guiding, and you can still register and join us. So we're back for session 2. We will be hearing more wonderful presenters on the topic of storytelling. Our first speaker in this part is Sohaia Ferre. She's a transmedia storytelling consultant and trainer at Yellow Pictures. She teaches transmedia storytelling, interactive storytelling, and documentary at the Multimedia Masters University of Porto. She's also, she does transmedia storytelling at Kino AS, the European Movie Masters, and teaches storytelling at Porto's Tourism School of Turismo in Portugal. Bem-vindo, Sohaia.
Hi everyone. First of all, let me just say that that music that we just listened was just beautiful. So that was amazing. So everyone can see my screen? Yep.
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So let me start by showing you a picture that I took when I was doing my first short film. And if you see this picture, it's from 2003. If you notice the camera, it's not a digital camera. Okay, I started shooting in 16mm, but then a lot of things change, as you know, in technology wise. So now what I'm doing is telling stories across different platforms. And if you're staring at the second picture, thinking about, is that a birthday cake? Yes. My birthday cakes always have a story. So this year, the story was transmedia storytelling applied to tourism. So what is transmedia storytelling? Transmedia storytelling means that you are telling stories across platforms, meaning that you have, for example, one platform, and in this case, I put the tour when you are giving tours. Then, for example, you also have an Instagram, and there you tell more stories. And then, for example, you have a website. So if you think of those platforms as pieces of the puzzle, if you connect the different stories that you tell in the different platforms, then you have a bigger story. And that is transmedia storytelling. When you are applying these techniques, you have 3 different elements that you need to pay attention to. So the first element, of course, is stories, which is what we have been talking about this morning. Then another thing that you need to considerate has to do with the platforms. What are the platforms that you are going to use to tell the different stories? And then last, but definitely not least, has to do with the audience and the audience engagement. So how does it work? In transmedia storytelling, you have one story world. You have many stories, you have many platforms, and one thing that it's fundamental for you to always remember has to do with its story expansion and not adaptation. This means that if you tell the story in one platform, you are not going to tell it in the other platform, or else you are going to be always telling the same thing. The objective here is for you to tell different stories and different parts of the story. I'm going to show you a case study, a project that I did back in 2012, and this was part of my PhD, and it was called Travel Plot Porto. So this is a transmedia storytelling tour guide. So the story is very simple. The tourists that visit my city, Porto in Portugal, they are challenged to find a hidden treasure. Okay, so the treasure, I actually invented the treasure. The way that I wrote the story was to read all of the books that I could have access to. Then I divided the story of Porto into very different chapters. So I had different chapters for each stage. Most of the characters of the story are true characters, like the kings and the people that lived in those times. But I had to create 4 characters, which are the ones that you are seeing online now. So this is the story of Porto divided into chapters. So each chapter, I call it historical chapter, has a different color. So for example, if you visit Porto and you really are into port wine, then you can just see this chapter. So there are 3 ways to do this story. So you could do it from beginning to end. So it starts when the Romans were in Porto, and then it goes until the present day. So that's one way to do it. The second way to do it is, for example, you only care about port wine. So you just do this chapter of the story. So you have the introduction of the story. And then if you see these little dots here, these are the locations that are associated with this chapter. So it's everything about port wine. But if you don't want to do the port wine chapter, then you can go to each location. So that's a different way of doing the story. So this is the example. So you have 3 different ways of doing this story. The main platform of the project was the iPhone or Android phone. So you had an app, and this was the opening of the app. You had these different possible locations where the treasure was hidden, and then you went to a location and then you clicked. So this is the picture that you have here. And then it opens, you have the story, and that's how it works. Then you also have here a little person, because whenever I travel, I always get lost. So I didn't want people to get lost when they were doing this project. And that's why you have a little man that gives you the indication where you are, to where that specific museum or monument that you want to go. So how did you know if the treasure was there or not? So you went to the location. In this case is the boats. And then you would go there, you would click, and then you would do a check-in. So then you will have a message back. So you see searching for the treasure. And then my point was for people not finding the treasure right away. I wanted to do a special event at the end of the project. So no one could find the treasure in the beginning of the story. Then another thing that you could do in the app is you could have a digital souvenir, because you know that tourists really enjoy it. So you could take a picture of any part of the visit that you were doing, something that you really enjoyed, and then you could share this picture in the different social media. So this project is from 2012. So back then it was Facebook and Twitter and email. So those were the main platforms. And this is the message that you had when sharing the story by email. Then another platform of the project was the website. So this was also a main platform. Here at the top, you had the social media of the project. You had Facebook and Twitter. And then here below, you had the story of Peter, the protagonist. So what does this mean? It means that you could do the story in 2 different ways. You could do it actively, coming to Porto and going to the places and search for the treasure. If you couldn't come to Porto, for example, now that the country is in a lockdown, so we cannot go anywhere, you could still accompany the story through the social media of the protagonist. So if you went to Pinterest, Twitter, and YouTube, you had Peter telling the stories to everyone in the world. So this was another way of doing the story. And it was really interesting, the engagement that I had with people following Peter, especially on Twitter. Another platform that we had was the print map. Because in 2012, mobile phones, I mean, there were a lot, but not smartphones. So people that didn't have access to one, they could use the print map. So we already saw the website, we saw the app, we saw the map. See, all of these platforms are integrated. And if you think about what is the story that you can see here that you cannot find in the other platforms, in this case, it was actually the city arms of the city. Another important platform for the project has to do with the experiences, because visiting a country or a place is not only about the monuments that you see, but it's always the experience that you have. So when you visit Porto, a very important thing has to do with food. So I had a restaurant that did a menu, and then that was a restaurant. Then you have to drink port wine. So a wine cellar was also a partner. And then you go on a cruise, the Douro cruise. So you had that partner too. So we had all of these different experiences. So this is the restaurant. And here at the door of the restaurant, you can actually see another location, a secret location. So you had to go to all of the different places to have the full story. This was also a social responsibility project. So the treasure that in the beginning didn't exist, at the end, it was actual money. So €1 of the menu at the restaurant was donated into the pediatric wing of the hospital that we have here in Porto. They need to build a new one. So this was also a project for people to know the project and also to donate. So this is how the project looked like. I know it's a lot. So here you have all the platforms that I was just talking about. This is the active way of doing it. This is the passive way of doing it through the eyes of the protagonist of the story. And then the end was actually a live event. So I hid the treasure inside the wine cellar. And this is how you found the treasure. And then lastly, you had the resolution. So these are the pictures at the wine cellar. The protagonist and the villain of the story, they encountered and then they have a fight. And this is the end. Here is the treasure. It's actually wood painted with gold paint. So that was the gold. Then this was actually the press conference. So it was set inside one of the locations of the story. And then this was on television, on the radio, newspapers, Facebook, all over. Then I just wanted to share some of the feedback that I got. For example, I got people saying, thanks for sharing, wish I could be there too, I'll be waiting for more pictures. Another person was from Porto, but never visited those places, so she has now the intent to visit. And then another one wanted to go treasure hunting in Porto. So this was the engagement that we got from the project. So the results of transmedia storytelling, there are several, but I'm just telling you these three, which is increase brand visibility, reach different audiences across platforms, and create shareable experiences. One thing that is very important is that there is no formula for doing a transmedia project, okay? So each project is different, and it has to do with your story, with your audience, with your context, and also the resources that you have available, okay, at hand. So my challenge for everyone that is out there is for you to start applying these to your own projects right now. So start today, piece by piece. You don't need to do everything at the same time, okay? You just need to start, think about the strategy, and start. If you want more resources on storytelling and transmedia storytelling, you can go to my latest transmedia project, which is storysd.com. And there you can find a lot of free resources. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Sohaia. I do believe we are missing a couple of your last slides. Technicians are on it, and the slides will be shared at a later date. On that note, some of you have asked if a link to the recordings would be available. Yes, they will be next week. The recordings will be on the Wftga YouTube channel and will be sent to members. And Sohaia, in the chat box before you leave, you can share any links to apps or online websites that you would like to see. I see you've just shared storysd.com, so that's perfect. Thank you very much. I learned also a lot. I'm loving this. I'm learning so many things I didn't know existed. Next up is we will talk about International Tourism Guide Day or Tourist Guide Day. On the 21st of February each year, the Wftga International Tourist Guide Day is marked by events and activities arranged by our members in their countries and cities to celebrate the profession. So Dr. Emma Guest-Gonzalez, President of the Guides Association of New York City and an active member of these associations and an active walking tour guide in New York City, will present a case study. And Emma has also been interacting in the chat box with you today. So Emma, I will hand it over to you to present our case study.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. Thank you everyone for attending. This has really been a very exciting morning, very early morning here on the East Coast of the United States. So welcome everybody, and it's an honor to present to you. What I'll be doing is just going over a little bit of what International Tourist Guide Day is and how it came about. And then I'll introduce our next two speakers. So as Genevieve said, it's celebrated every year on February 21st. Why that date? Well, that is the birthday of the WFTGA, which was founded in February of 1985. WFTGA was founded at the first International Convention of Tourist Guides, and it's the only global forum for tourist guides from around the world. And WFTGA unites individual guides, guides associations, educational institutions, and tourism partners. So International Tourist Guide Day is our annual celebration. The very first one was held back in 1990 with only 15 countries participating. But today it is an international event. WFTGA represents more than 200,000 individual tourist guides from over 90 separate countries. Now, ITGD, International Tourist Guide Day, is aimed at raising public awareness about tourist guides who are the cultural ambassadors of their cities, their regions, and their countries. Members of WFTGA are encouraged to hold events to draw attention to fellow citizens, the media, and local authorities to the important work of tourist guides and tourism in general. Of course, a sector that has been profoundly impacted by the global pandemic and by tourism falling off the wayside really over the past year. The theme for each Tourist Guide Day is linked to the theme that is announced every year by the United Nations World Tourism Organization. World Tourism Day is actually in September, and this year the theme was tourism and rural development. That is why our theme was tourist guides as contributors to rural tourism through creative storytelling. And we've heard some wonderful, wonderful presentations about how to become a better storyteller. Now, guides and guiding associations from around the world held many different events. They included virtual tours, award shows, panels, discussions, webinars, and many other things. Many associations also posted wonderful videos and images from their countries and their historic sites. These may be found on the WFTGA social media sites, and I encourage you to have a look. There's so many wonderful YouTube videos of all the different activities and the different events that took place. You'll almost feel like you're traveling again. I'd like to highlight two in particular. In the Philippines, they planted trees on International Tourist Guide Day, including one for each member of WFTGA's executive board, for their training committees, and the area representatives. Croatia started a special initiative back in 2012. It started in the city of Split, where the program was Children as Guardians of Cultural Heritage. And this has continued in their International Tourist Guide celebration. Children are introduced to their cultural heritage by visiting local sites with tourist guides to help raise their awareness and to foster a sense of pride. And this wonderful initiative continues today, and we hope it'll reach other countries as well. Today, we will close the events of this conference with a video collage which highlights some of the great associations and their celebrations of International Tourist Guide Day. So for now, I would like to introduce our next two presenters, Macia Gliha and Nina Bu from the Slovenia Tourist Guide Association. They'll be telling us how they celebrated. And so welcome, Slovenia. Thank you so much.
Hello, hello, dear friends all around the globe. Welcome from Slovenia. As Ellen said, my name is Mateja, and with me is also my colleague, Nina. And we are really happy that you gave us a chance to share with you all our experiences from this year's International Tourist Guide Day. As you all know, last year, let's say a week ago, we really were able to celebrate our International Day in person, but this year the situation was completely different. And believe it or not, the success was even bigger than last year. So I would like to ask Nina to go for the next slide. just to show us one picture, and that you will see that actually what we find a kind of a success at the moment, the path to this success was really not easy, as generally I would say to every happy ending. You know, with tourist guides, Nina, you can go on. With tourist guides, we actually started last year very worried because, you know, there were no visitors on horizon. So the question was what to do, where to go. And we had quite a lot of Zoom meetings with our colleagues discussing on weekly basis, you know, not just on monthly basis, because before we were in contact on monthly basis, but then every week we were talking what to do, what to do, what to do. And then we said, well, what can we do the best? What is our role? Definitely, this is storytelling. As you said today, interpretation, telling the stories, putting facts in stories. That is something that we knew. Another thing that, let's say, we were quite good at was the language knowledge. So we were able to present these stories in different languages. The only question was how to reach audience. And our first act was actually just to start the production of videos. I know you might be surprised, how come, you know, tourist guides doing video, but I think that this was the only thing that at that moment really encouraged us and to go on with usage of our skills. So Nina, please go on, because we have another slide telling us what we all did in the, let's say, period from September until the end of the year. Definitely, what was good was that we were a community, that there were quite a few guides who actually were willing to do something. So there were also a lot of our colleagues who were willing to share the knowledge with other colleagues, you know, because we have different backgrounds and we stick together and we said, let's share. What do we know? Somebody is good in Instagram. The other one is good in Facebook. The third one is good in YouTube. And that's why we had those weekly, let's say, motivation seminars where we shared our knowledge and experiences. So there was a motivation. The only thing was that films, that was not enough. You know, we like the interaction. We would like to see the feedback from our visitors. So we knew that we need to start with our live tours. And believe it or not, it was not easy for everyone, because there was a huge technique and huge technology behind that we needed to learn how to use a stabilizer, how to use headsets, how to position yourself, and so on. So let's say at the beginning of this year, when we were already very clear that our International Tourist Guide Day will be virtual event, we tried to motivate guides all around Slovenia. So not just our members, but, you know, also the other guides. We had some Facebook groups like Sustainable Tourism. There are also other shareholders of tourism, you know, and we did the presentation, how to do that all virtual experiences online. And suddenly we got so many colleagues from all around Slovenia that wanted to be with us on this International Tourist Guide Day, that we got enough events for 3 full days. Nina later on will share the data with you, but, you know, we were really impressed. What we also liked very much is that government supported us. You know, they knew that we are in difficult situation, and believe it or not, on Thursday, before this, let's say, live event started, supported us on our press conference, the general director of our ministry. Then we had, for example, the presenter of the Slovenian Tourist Board Organization. There were 5 destination representatives. And on the day of the celebration, Sunday, February 21st, guest in our studio was also the director responsible for tourism. So in fact, we had so many events that supported us all together that we were really overwhelmed. And I think that this year gave us an opportunity to promote our tourist guiding profession even more. I mean, you know, it's nice to be live together, but what we achieved with our virtual platform, that was, I think, something that nobody expected. Nina, please do share now your data.
So hello, hello from Slovenia. Thanks for having me here. So I will just shortly go through all what we do for preparation for this our project, because I call it actually a big project. It was a very important deal for us. So we started somehow in the beginning of the January, as Matea already said, but announcement went out on 21st of January, so exactly one month before the event will start. And we give also an appeal to all the tourist guides around Slovenia, and this was like really a good deal, because we got something like 50 guides who say yes to present themselves in this virtual event. We had also something like this. We gave 3 possibilities, so they could do a virtual guided tour, they can do online presentation, or they can do a pre-recorded videos with their own stories from all around Slovenia. So at one place we were capable to show all Slovenia to a lot of people we reached, what I will say at the end. So between the 22nd and 31st of January, we had something like memories about the past International Tourist Guide Days. So with some photos and daily posts on Facebook, and also call to action. So we call to action all the tourist guides per email as well as per Facebook. And we did also some Instagram promotion in English language, because the Facebook and the mail was only in native, in Slovenian, because this was our target audience. And per Instagram, we did a promotion also that we spread the word worldwide. So also that in the other parts of the world, they saw what we are preparing. After that, from 1st till 17th of February, what we did was that we launched the LinkedIn page. Our Facebook page was daily posted with all announcement what will happen on the this weekend between 19th and 21st of January, and still a promotion on Instagram. We did also we shared also information what where it will be possible to watch us. So we decided for restream, and we said, okay, we will stream on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and also on our website. And at that point, the real work started for our working team, as first to settle up the working team. So the moderators, the technical support, that were all our members. So we didn't rent somebody to do it for us. So we did everything alone. We started to meet with our participants, with all 50, to just to work, to show them how it works, how they share the screen, how it will look when we go live. So this was really quite interesting period of the whole project. And then we went live. So between 18 and 21st, so on 18 we have press conference, and then 3 days of full broadcast online program from all over Slovenia. And it was not the end on 21st. We just continue our story. So between 22nd and 28th of February, we wrote some thanks to all who participate, who watched us, who supported us. We did some throwback memories. We did a prize game, as much as we also say thanks to our local printed media who wrote about us, because it was also very important that also local printed media supported us as we were writing the articles. And yeah, the numbers were amazing. So the story or the message, what we would like to share, or what we wanted to share, was that we're the tourist guides. We are still here. We are still kicking, so we are adapting the challenges that are coming to us. And the event was a huge success and extremely well received, with prizes and kudos. So the numbers were like these: 70 posts in 1 month, people reached over 40,000. It's like 1,000% more than usually. Engagement about 10,000. We got new followers of 200 plus 264. A lot of comments, shares, and likes. So our social media grow really up. And then we have also only on live videos. On 4 days, we reached over 20,000 people on Facebook, and additional 2,000 per YouTube. And that means we had like 23,000 minutes of watching, and then 320 minutes of watching, and then on additional 17,000 on YouTube. So really a lot of people saw what we did. Also, our Instagram reached 69% more people as before, and we got also like 40 new followers. What was an amazing work. And one more time, it was everything made it from our members. So we didn't rent anyone for this. And afterwards, a lot of local media wrote about it. It was all over the media, and we got also a lot of written thanks from all who watched us, and somehow said that we did a really good job, and that is the best prize or the best thing what can happen after a harsh work. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Mateja. Amazing turnout. You guys had a great following. Let me ask you a very quick question. In one sentence, each of you, what would you say your key learning has been in getting this up?
I would say there is always opportunity for something new. Just go for it.
Fantastic. And what about you, Nina?
So I would say just don't be afraid. So I will just continue from Mateja on, and just don't be afraid to do it, try it, and at the end there is success guaranteed.
A true story and an amazing story of turning around and trying something new. Tourist guides are very resilient. They're very creative, and you guys have proven that. I have to say, before I introduce our next speaker, I had a chance to go to Slovenia in 2018 on a professional conference. That's actually where I met Aluška Ricci, your president. And I'm sorry, I didn't know much about Slovenia before. It's not, I'm from North America. I never really heard about the country except the name. But I ended up spending some of the best 3 weeks of my life in Slovenia. We traveled all around, and it's to this day one of my best traveling experiences in the last 30 years, I think. So yeah, amazing country. If those of you don't know about Slovenia, look it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will now hear from Marcelo Rizzi. He was appointed Director of Communication of the World Tourism Organization, otherwise known as UNWTO, in 2018. He joined UNWTO in late 2006 to manage global media relations after working for more than 10 years in international broadcasting as the economics correspondent for Latin America service of Deutsche Welle. I might not be pronouncing that properly. He's been a producer with the BBC World Service in the UK, and he's, this says bilingual correspondence for the BBC in Madrid, but I think you actually speak something like 5 languages. So, bienvenue, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. Very happy to be here, and I was fortunate enough to follow all the interventions since you began. Well, my working language is English. My mother tongue is Spanish. I'm bilingual, actually German, so you almost pronounce it well. Deutsche Welle, the German wave. And there you go. And the other languages are Italian because of the origin. So it's a big mixture. So I was kind of genetically predisposed really to work with in global tourism, and very happy to be here on behalf of the World Tourism Organization. As you know, the TGA is an affiliate member of ours. We're very unique in the context of the UN organizations, as we have not only member countries with the voting right, we have also what we call affiliate members, which is really a whole basket of from private companies, airlines, hotel chains, and so on, to what we call semi-public members, tourism boards, and of course, private associations, NGOs, etc., like yours. So this really connects us to tourism on the ground. We're not just in the ivory tower of United Nations and speaking on behalf of tourism in the United Nations, but we're very concerned, and it's our daily task to really be connected to what happens in reality with tourism on the ground. And that's why also being affiliated to UNWTO, just as you are, is so important for us. To what has been discussed here, and looking back at 2020, so tough for everybody, and the still uncertain immediate future that we're facing. And from a communications perspective, it's very interesting to listen to really the keynote address early on, the interpreter, so the tourism guide, the tour guide as an interpreter, de facto interpreter, and then very concrete campaigns like the ones we were just learned about from Slovenia. I have been only to Ljubljana, not Slovenia. I never went beyond Ljubljana, and I look forward to go back. So I can only really endorse what Genevieve just said regarding the country and regarding the people. Communications, as you know, has been, in the case at least of the World Tourism Organization, really the first responder to the COVID-19 pandemic. But we always approached it against the backdrop of being an international organization, a member-based organization, who are really the ones we represent. And we tried, and I think we succeeded in really implementing a credo that we had back at the BBC World Service. As you heard, I've come from the World Service as one of my several prior lives, and it was that it's better to be right than to be first. So of course, everybody approach UNWTO, because it's a global governance body, really asking for the proverbial crystal ball. What will happen? How long will it last? When will we be returned to 2019 pre-pandemic international tourism levels, and so on? The key here was to resist and not to give in to temptation. And I think, as everybody has seen, all predictions that many were really anxious to fire out already as early as really February last year, March, early stages of really the hard lockdowns and the pandemics, certainly here in Spain, where UNWTO is based, all predictions proved to be wrong. The fact is simple, it's unprecedented. So we had to be coherent with that. We succeeded in a real and an unhurried, clear and consistent communication strategy, also aware of the fact that we are responsible, we have to be responsible as a public, as an organization devoted really to the public. Still, you have to say something. Still, you have to craft a narrative without losing your overall framework, which is, of course, as you know, as any other UN agency, it is the so-called 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's the 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, which are most of them linked directly or indirectly to what we do in tourism. So early on, we, without knowing what would be coming, we established really the Stay Home Today #TravelTomorrow campaign. Tomorrow, as opposed to how the song goes, it's not tomorrow never comes, it comes. And we want to hope that tomorrow is getting closer and closer. But we need to be prepared. So our overall message throughout this time, and still is, tourism needs to be prepared for when people can travel and can move again. It proved to be very successful. It was, and this is the the ultimate, I think, KPI, the ultimate key performance indicator of a campaign is when everybody feels co-ownership of it. So the hashtag Travel Tomorrow was used by our member countries, by non-member countries of UNWTO, by private companies, by media outlets, by individuals, to the extent that CNN International, who's a media partner of UNWTO, produced themselves a small video clip based on that idea of Travel Tomorrow, and offered us for over 2 months free airtime throughout their outlets in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America. I sent previously the clip for everybody to have a minute of the time, and I'll get back to it and explain some more about the idea behind it. So if we can watch the video, please.
Movement defines us.
Standing still is not an option.
We must come together again under shared values.
With sustainability as a guiding principle.
We are the innovators, the game changers.
We are travelers. We celebrate diversity and champion solidarity.
Rowing back for people and planet.
Unlocking opportunities for millions.
And leaving nobody behind.
The world is waiting. We will restart tourism.
Well, of course, you didn't see any hashtag resembling Travel Tomorrow whatsoever. This is Restart Tourism. This was the second one. But okay, it's almost mathematical that the order of the elements don't alter the final product. Oh, we're watching now, I believe, the first one. Or not? Oh, yes.
Tomorrow sounds good. With its new words, hot tips, and best-kept secrets. Like local beats, touring bands, and classic tunes. It's the cheer of birdsong, crashing waves, and sleepless cities.
Tomorrow looks good. With familiar faces, colorful characters, and deep blue seas. Like nothing you imagined, everything you dreamed. Bright as a canopy of stars.
It's your first flight, first night in town, and setting off at first light.
Tomorrow feels good with best laid plans, the best in town, and the best you've ever had.
Like sealed deals, bucket lists, and being there when it counts.
It's the home away from home, the thrill of the unknown.
In it together
or alone. Tomorrow isn't a world away.
Stay home for now.
Dream forever.
Okay, here we are back. So this is a proof that we are live. This is a live event and we are alive. So it doesn't really make such big a difference. It's just it consumes a bit more of my speaking time but hopefully keeps your attention really, really alive. Travel Tomorrow was really more, if you like, traditional tourism narrative using a set of images that one would identify directly with tourism, maybe linking to specific destinations, things one does when traveling, or things one fantasizes and wants, and really they're aspirational. And this was at the early stages where we still didn't know how things would be evolving. Definitely, we have experienced a huge growth in visibility throughout 2020. Digital communications, as in everything else, and we're zooming still, as we know, was key and was put to the test. So the more robust really your digital infrastructure, both technical, but also in terms of the communications approach and the reaction time was, the better really you were able to respond to this huge demand for information and changing of really lifestyle. We have experienced both the organization, UNWTO, but also the sector, unprecedented levels of public visibility, of recognition, and really something which is key for us as a UN agency of really breaking tourism out of the tourism silo. And we all know the tourism sector always claims, and quite rightly so, having really the broadest economic value chain, the deepest social footprint. But still, tourism coverage was pretty much limited to the tourism segment, the tourism department, of public debate, of news coverage, etc. What has the pandemic forced us to do to stop tourism, bring it to a halt, but also to raise public awareness that everything that we're prohibited, that we impaired to do, is really linked to tourism, directly or indirectly, going out, engaging with people, doing certain things, let alone travel, of course. And this reflects not only the importance of our sector, but really the relevance of the sector. So the media impact was huge. So of course, CNN is a media partner, but this was free of charge. We don't pay them a dime. And we really align with CNN as we do with other global outlets and also national, regional outlets around shared values, common points of interest, and work based on that. So for an outlet like CNN International to offer free airtime is huge and is really a reflection of also recognizing how important our sector is. Of course, this builds towards growing reputation. And this again is a virtuous cycle, supports our partnership building, which is key for a public organization like UNWTO. We're not a multilateral agency. We're not a donor agency. We work with donor agencies or with multilaterals, but as such, we're a political body. And this, of course, built up towards, as the year progressed and we learned more about the virus, the pandemic, the region, of course, suffered the impact on tourism to the next level, which is we need to be ready for when tourism resumes, as I said at the beginning. And this led to the Restart Tourism campaign, which was the second really big tagline that we've been pushing over the years. So again, unhurried, clear messaging. The more hashtags you use in general, the more they lead to absolutely nowhere. And we have to be cautious because of our public responsibility to the public. And this led again, as I said, to the Restart Tourism campaign. And now if our colleagues from production at the Wftga can show again the second video, Restart Tourism.
Movement defines us.
Standing still is not an option.
We must come together again under shared values.
With sustainability as a guiding principle.
We are the innovators, the game changers.
We are travelers. We celebrate diversity and champion solidarity.
Rowing back for people and planet.
Unlocking opportunities for millions.
And leaving nobody behind.
The world is waiting. We will restart tourism.
Thank you again. So here we move away from the typical tourism image, from something which could really be found in a promotional video, piece, asset, etc., but focus on the human angle and on cross-cutting values, which we are convinced that tourism represents. Only once we mentioned the traveler, because the traveler embodying and being an active player in this value chain, if you want, if this social and community and development impact value chain, and that we will come, of course, and travel again, but for all the right reasons. And this is linked to the rethinking tourism moment that we believe that we are and that reality forced us to be in. So this sudden stop of everything, and especially of our sector, forces also to initiate a thinking process of how will we come back? So a typical question that we've been faced with is, when will we return to the 1.5 billion international tourist arrivals that UNWTO registered in 2019. So we're not sure, is this a question really? Do we want to go back to those figures? We want to go back, but how do we want to go back? Our narrative is around rebuilding the sector and rebuilding it, of course, in a sustainable manner and with innovation really also as a cross-cutting feature. Why? Because we have many other challenges looming. We have the COVID-19 pandemic, we have the recession, of course, that is a broader socioeconomic resonating echo chamber in the context of the pandemic. We have the climate challenge, which is still there and ongoing. This is all on our agenda. And the traveler can be a key element in responding to that. Tourism can be a vehicle of raising awareness. And this is where we believe your role within the Wftga, your memberships, and really the focus of the interpreter becomes so relevant. You are, from our perspective, a critical part of that tourism value chain. You link between, of course, the visitor, the traveler, and the destination. And I don't even want to call it really destination. The community, the culture, the people that are visited. I remember my first press trip that I organized with the UNWTO as a media officer was to Guatemala in Central America. And I come from journalism. I don't come from a tourism background. And I brought a cross-cutting selection of media, not only tourism journalists, specialists, but also a journalism university professor, for instance, from university here in Spain, the Complutense University. I brought a political commentator, an op-ed writer from an Italian newspaper, business journalist. Difficult to get them. It wasn't your typical fan trip where you show a destination, the new hotel, airport development, a new product, a special chef. That's all been done before. If you want to raise the awareness and the interest, in this case of the media, show the true story. Not necessarily the hotel, but maybe an interesting chef or another approach or a community involvement project really steered and pushed there forward by that establishment and so on. So if we are really a cross-cutting sector, we also need to address a cross-cutting target audience. And this was in this case interesting. Why? Because I was able to get this small group anyway, not a school excursion, 6 people, no more, if you want to have a quality relationship and engagement. But also the role of the tour guide was essential. This was a young lady fascinated by tourism, but her background again was not tourism. Tourism came into her life at a later stage. She was an anthropologist. And Guatemala, those of you who have been fortunate also to travel that country, of course, is but the really center of the Mayan culture, next to the southern tip of Mexico. So we had an anthropologist view and reading of the legacy of a country at the intersect with tourism. And this is what it's about. We've seen all the terms of marketing, the experience, the living with the community and so on. And it's a fact. Consumers in general are increasingly interested in not really having that experience with their backs turned to the reality they visit. We are aware, and we are also consumers, of course, of our social footprint, our environmental footprint, what we receive, but also what we can give back. And this is again where the role of associations like the Wftga and your broad membership play a key role. You are part of that rethinking tourism approach, connecting at the microeconomic individual level and using tourism as a vehicle to transmit all of that. The impact on communities, the positive that tourism can achieve, and the contribution to really rethinking our sector and restart as we learn to deal with the pandemic and its consequences, and come out stronger and truly sustainable, because we don't have a doubt that tourism will come back. We know that tourism is always really on the crest of the wave of innovation. Regulation follows also innovation, and you are a critical element to all of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gracias, Marcelo.
Nada.
Tourism will come back. We know that. We are all dying to get in a car, on our bicycles, on a plane, on a boat, seeing these wonderful places. But the Travel Tomorrow campaign is a good way for us to still see some of the places while we dream about them. And it's been amazing. The following to the UNWTO's campaign has really been picked up by destinations all over the world. We have seen many, many destinations doing great campaigns about we're still here, we'll be here when you're back tomorrow. But what we have also seen is, as you have quickly mentioned, the boost of local tourism and really people rediscovering their countries, rediscovering their cities, and destinations understanding that they were first and foremost a place where people live before they are a place where other people visit. And I work with destination management organizations a lot. And I've really found that they have learned to talk to their citizens. They've learned to talk to their residents. They've gone and met their locals. And there's been a great advancement in showcasing local assets. So there are some silver linings to this pandemic for tourism. And I think that when we do visit again, the offer of authentic local experiences will be so much greater for all of us visitors. So thank you for that intervention. Our last speaker today will be Panayotis Neufeld. He's the founder and chairman of the International Cultural and Creative Industries Regulatory Authority, or ICCIRA, who is a WFTGA partner. He's also chairman of the International Independent, a consortium of cultural and creative industries, research, economy, and policy organization. He's also the chairman of the Arts Council in Greece. He's a busy guy. Panayotis has a dual background, both technical and creative, as a theater director, curator, producer. He's got a secret life as an aviation specialist and entrepreneur, and also works as a political advisor, consultant, researcher, and public speaker. Speaking on behalf of ICCRRA, welcome, Panayotis.
Hello. Dear esteemed members of the World Federation of Tourist Guides Associations, WFTGA. Thank you, Aluska, and dear friends and participants of this virtual conference. Thank you for having me here. It's a great honor. Well, you know my name, so I don't need to mention it the second time. It's a great pleasure, but because this is the first time after 22 years that I present to the public the untold story which led to the formation of the organizations I lead on the inception. Please allow me, before doing so, to share with you a fairy tale on tourism. Tourism is one of the youngest children of culture. It's the fifth child that was born after care, community, immigration, and creativity. When culture met need, their love was so great, gave birth to immigration. But immigration left home early, just after creativity started to talk. Culture and need were having difficult life, and although they loved each other enormously, they were fighting, and their fights were fierce. One day, prosperity visited them and showed them the way to the land of understanding, the mountains of knowledge, and the country of the new. Culture and need were mesmerized and ready to explore with care, community, and creativity the wonders of those unknown worlds. During this journey, tourism was born. But we all know that. And we all know that this is a myth or a figment of my imagination. The relationship between culture and tourism is interactive. To understand it, we must explore the elements that compose this environment, which constantly changes. In terms of supply, we deal with what we can offer, such as people presence, heritage, monuments, museums, sites, theaters, arts, sports, social gatherings, entertainment, landscapes, and much more. In terms of demand, we need to look at what motivates the visitor to visit the place. Demand is also heavily monitored by the states and the markets and influenced by the legal framework, socio-political and economic situation, cultural changes and trends. Demand in general is created by countries with capable, ready market to spend or invest in tourism. But the visitors, the customers or consumers, are the ones who pave the ground for a fruitful future. If we do not know the specific characteristics of our visitors, the special interests, the purchasing power, the availability, or his or her timetable, we will never be able to create the right products, services, or construct the appropriate infrastructure, support the right decision-making, understand the available scientific analysis. But you are well aware of all this. Allow me to take you to my world in an attempt to intrigue your combinatorial thinking. In 1996, I immigrated from Greece to England. During that time, as an artist, a theater director, I was producing more deficit than productions. I belonged to the majority that lived with the expectation to work with dignity. I was a trading failure and worked for nothing. Then I realized that my problems are A, common, B, can become valuable. So no organization was keen to support me as a young theater director, and the competition was great. Now, regulatory entities have their own complex agendas, endless funds year in, year out, and great pool of potential associates and far back thinking. My job was to complete my theatrical and music productions. I was to ask for small or big favors from relatives, friends, associates, mayors, governments. The results were trivial. And my begging letters were everywhere. Then I understood that my million problems could potentially become my allies. I studied the government organization's behavior, the corporate structures, management and economics, and I was pissed off because I'm a hard trained artist who is thinking in a three-dimensional way within a two-dimensional world, which is the government and the corporate environment. I could not understand the reason behind it all, but I could record my thoughts, and that was a good starter. I did not wait for long. Back then, the creative ecology was a tabula rasa, a blank paper, with limited culture and creative industries terminology, and only few available scientific papers on cultural management. And universities could not combine in depth the knowledge, skill, and attitude that management produces in combination with traditional economy and finance in relation to culture and creativity. Only a few universities offered curators and producers courses. Well, cultural economy and cultural diplomacy back then were non-existent. We are between 1996 and 2000. I created the International Independent Arts Council, which later became the Independent Arts Culture Creative Industries and Entertainment Consortium under the organization called the International Independent, focusing on policy, economy, and marketing, specifically designed for the independent artists and organizations who produce more than 90% of the global creativity and consume less than 20% of the global capital produced by this creative ecology. During that time in Greece, I formed the Arts Council Greece. Now, in 2000-2002, the EU eventually realized that there is a bottomless pit in the European economy, consuming billions of euros. They needed to identify this gray area. The European Commission, along with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, the UNCTAD, formed a coalition and identified that the newly so-called creative industry somehow consumed the orphan capital. And this is what we learned to refer later as cultural and creative economy. In many cases, this capital has been used by industrialists to safely compete with each other. By then, as a founder of the independent organization, I was free to choose the problem I could unravel first. I had no supporters back then. I was a young activist, but felt rich because independence may be the most expensive and in many occasions controversial element in real ever trading world, and so close to freedom. Then I felt deeply lonely and isolated, but only for a few years. During this time, I thought that if isolation is what this system offers to me, then isolation will become my tool until my organization is strong enough to carry on. Then I moved to one of my first realizations, that whatever we produce has a value. Even isolation has a value. I realized that my fellow neglected artists belong approximately to the 80% of the human power of this nascent cultural and artistic entertainment industry. These people and organizations were receiving less than 20% of the funds generated, as I said, living with the expectation to work, as I did 22 years ago. This is where the International Cultural and Creative Industries Regulatory Authority comes in, because people expect, in general terms, to gain knowledge, a good life, to live in a better civilization, but instead they get entertained, fighting for survival. And because the remaining 20% of the artists and cultural organizations globally are divided in two major groups, the 2.5% approximately that consumes the 80% of the global recorded funds produced in this nascent cultural and creative industries environment, and the 70.5% approximately who live in the fringes of this specific market, but interact directly with it, i.e. with the 2.5%, who are no other than the systemic artists and the mainstream players. What we know so far is that the cultural phenomena are fundamentally determined by their economic structures and production modes. And this is our starting point. Therefore, we have to face two basic crucial questions. First, what kind of analytic procedure should be followed or would take place in order to explain and enhance or decline the production line of cultural, economic, and social phenomena? And second, what would be the politics which could develop the progressive thinking into a tender age that will amalgamate the people's needs within a nascent creative arts and cultural environment? I believe that culture is the intellectual power behind any production. We have to deeply understand what culture and creativity is in order to enhance people to comprehend their responsibilities, as well as their rights within the society we live in. Three important factors that do not appear often in this debate of scientific ideas related to cultural growth and productions are, first, the social origin of creativity and its intensity at a level of economic growth and development, and its impact in the real economy, as well as the deep dependencies to other industries and the banking system. Second, the proportion of non-subsidized organizations out of the total of the cultural resources of the country, and the social tensions created over time, qualitatively and quantitatively. And third, the relationship between the hyperproductivity of cultural, artistic, and creative sectors and the austerity policies due to the crisis of this financial system, often followed by another crisis. The creatives, by understanding their external environment, they define where they stand. Today, we have to focus on arts advocacy arguments in order to understand legislative issues and systemic bugs. How can national arts funding agencies better articulate the value and benefits of the arts to society as a whole? This is a perennial question, and one that is inextricably linked to the debates and challenges of defining and measuring the public value of culture. To provide some important initial context about the public value of culture, I quote John Holden and Jordi Balta. The debate on cultural value began as an argument between two key policy concepts: the instrumental value, when culture is funded by governments primarily because of its economic and social benefit, and the intrinsic value, when culture is funded as a public good in its own right. Now, from the narrow focus of the meaning of value in cultural policy, the debate raised questions about social justice, the management of cultural organization, the responsibilities of government, economic valuation of culture, measurement, how to account for intangible values, artistic quality and expertise, and the relationship between the arts and the creative industries. Arts are the key to creating that environment and to ensuring that culturally rich cities are a location of choice for investors and visitors. Culturally rich countries invite people to live in and prosper. The International Cultural and Creative Industries Regulatory Authority, IKIRA, is a progressive cultural legislative organization currently relocating in Brussels. IKIRA has been formed as a response to the everyday concerns and awareness of the vast majority of the people working in the arts, culture, and the creative industries and sectors. This response is implemented with the use of modern tools of cultural economy, policy, and management related to the international and national legal and regulatory trading framework. And through this framework, to reflect the social, cultural, economic, political, constitutional, and legal needs, events, production, collaborations, and activities. Unfortunately, we have created a society where anti-intellectualism leaves no room or little space either for critical thinking or leadership. Therefore, we need to unearth certain intentions and certain needs. From sub-Saharan African villages to New York and from Western China prefectures to remote Bolivian mountains, cultural ecologies and creative groups of people are developing new approaches in cultural understanding. Critical thinking, in many occasions, challenge or resist the offered cultural leadership stereotypes. Contemporary cultural and creative trends, as well as heritage, law, technology, science, trade, and contemporary economics, are only a few of the major sectors related to cultural growth and development. The vast majority of the people worldwide facing the negative impact of the above technological and economic growth, they protect their art and trade, well-being, protesting against poverty, standing by the right to get paid, the right to choose and create freely. At the same time, artists recognize that their need to participate is greater than their need to find funds in order to support their creative work. Therefore, art and organizations forms collectives, especially when they know in advance that globally there is no coherent legal system that will fully cover the right to protest their work and offer them the opportunity to mobilize internationally, mingle with other artists freely, develop and offer the best of their work. The same factors in issue apply for the protection of the cultural heritage. The question remains the same. How cultural leadership will evolve to something which will eventually become acceptable by the majority of the people? The answer is cultural democracy. The question again is how governments will be able to construct a common international legal system, especially when they do not have an established common international voting system, for instance, that will reflect openly the needs of the people and the markets and the governments. This is what we aim for. This is Ikira's proposal. We pave the way for a healthy transition from the old system to a new model and a new approach related to the international legal and regulatory trading framework. Culture and creativity, cultural economy, and the legal system, rules and regulations are actually evolving realities. All these areas are dependent from a series of variables, but also dependent on other factors such as the environment, trading trends, economy, growth, political changes, wars, unrest, etc. Therefore, Ikira has all the tools and the elements in order to get developed into a fresh, new international cultural and creative ecology itself. We need to raise cultural and political awareness, not necessarily through politics, but also through cultural and creative industries production line. So that is to move from the bottom to the top. Now, the Spaniard sociologist Manuel Castells understands political awareness as something, and I quote him, as something which is completely and utterly incapable to intervene to markets movements, as the second are freed from political control and therefore far away from the citizens' understanding. Castells mentioned that policy is continuously suffering from deficit of power, which leads us to the conclusion that contemporary politics remain local or national, while the markets and societies, along with culture and cultural actors, move globally. Bad politics and bad policies can create general social confusion, cultural dismantle, which affects the individual and local cultural identities, as well as international relations. This is a fertilizer for social mismanagement, corporate greed, while access to justice is becoming increasingly more and more difficult for the people with limited income and for the poor ones. Ikira is here to record and develop these areas, presenting new ways of thinking through the constitutional, legal, and regulatory framework and through legislation. We will be offering new legislative designs and models through production lines and the support of national ministries of culture, which will reflect the local and international needs of all actors and culture and their creative and invested or political and social interests. We have ready a memorandum of understanding, which will be developed in a second way, and will be presented to governments. And we do have our manifesto ready on our website. And that's all, actually.
Thank you, Panayotis. Thank you for outlining the critical work that Akira is doing and the importance of the partnership also with WFTGA. And I have to say that you have a lovely storytelling voice and rhythm, and I could have listened to you tell stories for a long time. So thank you for that. I will now ask Alushka Raji, the WFTGA president, to come into the room with me. And Alushka, that was the wrap up for our presentations. But please, those of you attending, don't go away. We've got a couple more pieces of content for you. Alushka, I do want to hear your perspectives. We have heard a lot of fabulous content. What are your key takeaways from today's presentations?
Thank you, Genevieve. I think to start the day, you actually said it, and you said it perfectly. We're making a story today, and we're making history. And I think we did that in a few different ways today, not only through the presenters and the content, but with people attending and their comments in the chat. So I do think that really put perspective to the day as well, with over 80 countries attending the forum. And then a few of the presenters really did their comments resonated. And I think the first one was with Elena, when she said, don't let your traditions disappear. And I think with the way we are now with virtual versus not necessarily the in-person content, that it's quite easy for us to let that happen. So thank you, Elena, for highlighting that. And then, of course, Lavinia said, don't be afraid to try it. And what this year has really done is put us out of our comfort zone. And even as tourist guides, we are supposed to adapt and be flexible, but putting us to this extent out of a comfort zone has been quite challenging. So thank you for that. Don't be afraid to try. It was really a good takeaway. And UNWTO, they've done such amazing things to really mobilize tourism, get us restarted, and we're quite resilient as tourist guides. So when Marcella reiterated that us as tourist guides play such a valuable part in the value chain of tourism, it was really good to hear it coming from their side as well, and to be acknowledged as a profession. And then to mention that we are the link for travelers, communities, and cultures was such a great sentence and a really good insight coming from them, and really justified that we do a good job as a tourist guide, and often forgotten being at the lower end of that value chain. But we add so much value to that experience for tourists. So Genevieve, that really was just a few highlights, but I would like to thank the presenters. They've given us a lot of food for thought, a lot of content, and some fantastic learnings.
I do want to join my thanks to yours. I've thoroughly enjoyed today's content and thought we really had top presenters. And you yourself outlined it to me in our chat. Tourist guides are great timekeepers. It's obviously a core skill that tourist guides have. So I've been impressed. You know that I work a lot on impact, and I'm very keen to help organizations make sure that whatever content they put out there is focused on creating true outcomes. So the wonderful experience and the glow that we're feeling today should translate into something concrete that each of us will put into action. So let me ask you, what has today inspired you to do? Do you have one action that you will commit to as a result of today?
Genevieve, to be honest, us as an organization, we're also on a journey. So just like our members, just like tourist guides, this is a journey for us. So over the next 3 days, we really are being given so much content, so much information, and it's really giving us the insider thinking to our members and to our tourist guides. And there will be a lot of opportunities coming forward in tomorrow's sessions as well for our members and for our tourist guides and with our partners. So I think from our side, when we have finished our association members meeting on Saturday, we will have so much valuable information that we could incorporate into our business plan for the rest of the year. So to me, it's actually twofold. There's no one key takeaway specifically today. There's multiple actually, and it's all little things that add up to the one big thing. And that big thing will come after our 3-day session.
Awesome. From my side, I will take the new learnings for sure on storytelling and implement that to kind of have better storytelling practices myself. So that's my commitment to myself. Hopefully everyone will make a commitment to themselves that they'll follow up on something. Ikira was our last presentation. Panayotis explained the complementary work that they're doing to the work that Wftga is doing. Tell us how your partnerships are key for moving forward.
One thing this pandemic year has told us is how important collaborations and partnerships are. And we've really started cementing these. And Akira is one of them. We sit on their board. We're really helping with the manifesto. And a lot of our guides are active in that sector. So it's really useful for us to have inside information and be part of that founding stone. So with Akira, it's been a different side. We're dealing with cultures, we're dealing with sites, we're dealing with museums. And that's really given us a leg up and also speaks to our credibility of the tourist guides and the organization. And then tomorrow we go on and we meet a few of our other partners, which will be really exciting for our participants to get the inside information from our partners and also future collaborations appearing out of that. And that actually puts me on to the next note to just recap what we're seeing tomorrow and to encourage participants to please register. So we will be seeing on the program the World Food Travel Association. We have a very good relationship with them. And there's a lot of nice content coming through them for the year to come, where we can use it to upskill ourselves as tourist guide, access to courses, and again, another opportunity for us as a tourist guide to make ourselves just get to that next level. And then also we have a potential relationship with our partners, our tour managers, our tour leaders, all people we work very closely with as tourist guides and who actually help us on tours, and working together and collaborating with them is also such a crucial point when we're visiting with visitors and tourists. So on the screen now, you can see the slide for tomorrow. So please participants, the registrations will be open for the rest of the day and for early tomorrow morning for some of you. Please go ahead and register. And if we just do a quick run through the program, we start off with a really fantastic motivational speaker and an analyst for trends. And he's going to put into context to the day the trends for 2021. And for a tourist guide, this is actually important because the trends actually affect what the tourist wants and how the tourist is going to travel. And those are our clients. So we need to adapt to feed these trends as well. Following Daniel, we then have Eric, who will give us, again, a little bit of insight into what people are wanting and how they are going about looking for their next tours and their next trips. And he is coming from the media perspective and represents a media conglomerate with Travel Pulse. After Eric, we then are being addressed from a government perspective. You know, being in the government perspective from a tourism level is such a different, gives us such different insight as well. Again, a very informative talk that's going to come our way from Secretary of State of Portuguese government. After Rita, we have Ava, who will give us the statistics behind what people are searching for their next trips. And she's from Google. She'll be presenting and giving us real-time statistics, and that will also help us as tourist guides to adjust for a new future in travel. After Ava, we meet Eric, who is from the World Travel Food Association, and will touch on the trends of food tourism and gastronomy tourism, which is still playing quite a big role in the way we are doing tours. Then we meet Van and his team, who will give us the perspective from tour directors and tour leaders. He's joined by Adam, and the two of them will be speaking to that subject, and they are potentially our employers as well. So they will touch on adjusting as a tourist guide to the employer's new needs. We then have from the guiding group, who will touch on cruising side of being a tourist guide and dealing with a new way of adjusting to river cruises and cruises in general. Amazon Explore, Becky will be presenting on opportunities for work for tourist guides with Amazon Explore and a potential another source of income in a very challenging time we find ourselves. I'm still sticking with the technology. We then have TravStack, who will be introducing their version of how we could possibly also move forward and adapt in the virtual world. Smart Guide, another app that we could use as a tourist guide and really sort of tweak ourselves to dealing with the virtual way of doing things nowadays. Michael Dillinger will give us a quick presentation on TikTok and a case study from his side. Adolfo will end the day and he will be speaking with the World Travel Tourism Council and really capture the entire day's thinking around tourism and the way forward and the future around tourism. So please be sure to register. We have all these leading experts and valuable information for us as working tourist guides.
Awesome. Thank you, Alushka. And as our team has been writing in the chat, it's still available for registration. The links are there. And I want to have everyone that's still on board to kind of virtually raise their hand to your team. Congratulations, everyone. Well done. Everyone's been writing in the chat how they've really enjoyed the conference. Thank you to all of the members that have been following the conference, the hashtags that have been watching. I want to remind you that there will be a link of the recordings available in the YouTube channel next week. They'll be sent to members. You'll also be receiving a survey at that time. Please take 3 minutes to complete the poll. The teams work so hard. It's really important for them to get your feedback. You probably will get some questions, I believe, also when you close the Zoom. I just want to share with you the numbers that our tech team have just sent us. The top viewership during the conference was 721. People from 84 countries. How amazing is that? So really huge congratulations. So we'll see you tomorrow. We are ending with a video collage of the International Tourist Guide Day 2021. And those of you who have registered, we will see you tomorrow at 12 UTC, 1300 hours in Central European time. Have a lovely rest of day or night if you're in Asia.
Thank you, Genevieve.
Wftga tourist guides all over the world. I'm Dimitra from Cyprus, now in France, but my heart always in my native place. And thanks to this special day that it is approaching, the International Tourist Guide Day, I'm thinking of all of us and my native place too.